Latch the windows, lock the doors, and put the kids to bed. It's time for another episode of
Tales from the Garage.
Hey guys, I'm back again. Again, taking my chances that this is going to record. I know the last video I did, I saw a lot of freezing screens when I was recording, and sure enough, the playback was slowed down quite a bit at times. I'm cold. This time I have a cup of hot tea here, though, with me. I'm always coming out to the garage for various things. Wasn't really planning on doing a video today. And noticed that it's actually, I'm still freezing, but I'm not as cold as I was the last video I did. So I noticed that it's slightly warmer today. And again, I don't know when the last time this could be it, that I'm going to get to come out here is and do a video where it's not absolutely, frozen. I have I have some stash here that I keep, like my 1 gallon jugs of water, and at some point, just on the shelf until I need them in the kitchen, because my kitchen's a tiny condo apartment style kitchen. So I have no room for the jugs of water until I need them. So I store them on a shelf here. And at some point in the winter, they freeze completely. So they're just a solid block of ice, a 1 gallon solid block of ice, which will prove that there is no heat out here. So anyway, cold as I am going to do another video, totally off the cuff and unprepared as usual. Just because I can, and because I don't know when I'll get back out here again, and with the computer problems I'm having with this computer out here, you never know. You just never know. Okay, so I'm just gonna randomly select some more vinyl. Ooh, I thought I was going to get an ECM, but not this time. I haven't heard this for a while because I don't have this on compact disc, but I really like this album. Elvin Jones, an album he did as a leader. I remember buying this. This is one of my Discomat purchases back in the... I bought this as a new release. So it's Elvin Jones, the great drummer, as a leader. This is I didn't even realize this. This was recorded once again at Rudy Van Gelder's studio in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey, on one day. The whole album, one day, February 10th, 1982. So this probably came out. This is Palo Alto Jazz Records. I don't think the label's around anymore. That's sad because at the time that I bought this, I remember buying quite a few Palo Alto jazz albums. And it really seemed like they were going full throttle. They were putting out, their output for a small label was, say, equal to that of, like ECM. So what we have here is a 42-minute album, produced, engineered by Rudy Van Gelder, February 10th, 1982. So I would have bought this as a new release, certainly. And it's got 6 tracks. 2 of them are actually written by Elvin Jones, who's probably not known much as being a composer as much as a jazz drummer. And there is one, I guess you'd consider it a standard track called Never Let Me Go. And the remaining 3 tracks are written by Dave Liebman, the saxophonist who plays on this album. He plays soprano, sax, and flute. So the band is Elvin Jones, Dave Liebman on soprano, sax, and flute, Terumasa Hino on cornet, and George Mraz on bass. George Mraz has played with everybody, including John Abercrombie, and the great late Kenny Kirkland on piano. So it's quite a band. Upright bass, piano, drums, and 2 horns. And what can I say? I remember liking it very much. It's a well-recorded album. Got a great cover to it. Hopefully you can see that. maybe a little bit ECM-ish, and which wasn't very here's something that wasn't very popular in the 80s. Liner notes, pretty, for a single album that doesn't open up or anything, got substantial liner notes on it. I almost hate to try to look this one up to see if it's available on CD, because I think I'm going to find out that it's one of those that I missed getting on CD, and it's been out of print for years, and somebody wants $100 for their copy of it. So Herbert Wong, Dr. Herbert Wong, a noted jazz journalist who was, at the time of this writing, on KJazz Radio in San Francisco. I wonder if that station's still around. Kind of doubt it. Wrote some liner notes on here, as well as Dave Liebman himself. I know at this time, Elvin Jones, I believe, came out with several albums as a leader. I don't know necessarily on this label or not, but people were interested in hearing him as a leader. And I can recall seeing on a PBS station several times, and I actually recorded it, but I think I recorded it on a Betamax videotape, so I don't have it anymore. There was a half-hour documentary filmed either the late 70s or early 80s about Elvin Jones. I think it was called Elvin Jones Different Drummer. And I don't know why it was only a half hour, but it was a half hour little documentary on him with interviews on him and him playing some solo drums and stuff like that. I bet you that documentary's out there somewhere. I mean, I bet you somebody else would have videotaped it even off of TV or something, and I wonder if it could be up on YouTube. It was quite interesting. Yeah, I can't say a lot about this album. I remember liking it very much. If you're familiar with Kenny Kirkland, who played with John Sermon, who played with, he played with Sting in his early solo career, and George Mraz's upright bass. This is an all-acoustic album. Terry Masahino, who I played all over the place. Did he play at one point with Gary Burton? I'm not sure. Dave Liebman, who's still around, who did a ton of things on his own even. No slouch as a sax player and flute. I don't recall there being much flute on here, though. I would love to hear Dave Liebman play flute. I don't think he did it all that much. And, of course, Elvin on drums. I want to hear this again now. I could be lucky, and it could. I kind of doubt this is available on CD only because of the Palo Alto Jazz Records I don't think is around anymore, and that's a shame. Okay. I'm going to pick another one. Well. Another one that's not an ECM. Here's two. I love twofers. Here's a twofer. Eric Dolphy. I remember buying this. This was another Disco Mat purchase. This is a repackaging of, obviously, which all twofers are repackaging, from 1973. I would have bought this in the very early 80s. And let's see. Oh, yeah, this is two complete albums that were released separately, again, which is what twofers are, but not a compilation. Two complete albums. Interestingly, the first album is Eric Dolphy in Europe, Volume 1, and the second album is Eric Dolphy in Europe, Volume 3. It's interesting that they put 1 and 3 in here, and I wonder why not 2, which I think I have. I think I have Volume 2. Possibly Volume 2 was a 2-album set. I'm not sure. So I'm not sure why they did 1 and 3 right offhand. I'm pretty sure that after this I did go out and buy Volume 2, though, wherever it was, whether it was packaged on another twofer or whatever. So, Eric Dolphy is a bit hard to explain for those that haven't heard them. A little bit of an avant-garde edge to his music. He was based in the traditional form of jazz. Died very young, from what I remember. But kind of went out there and got into the avant-garde and the free jazz quite a bit. at times, various times in his career. Both of these albums were recorded in the same day. This must have been a marathon day for him. Very long concert appearance. So I wonder if it was 2 concerts he did. Because this is volume 1 and 3, and they were both recorded on the same day. So I'm going to assume maybe the reason they didn't include volume 2 is because volume 2 could have been recorded from a different date. I don't know. But this was recorded September 8th, 1961. So Eric does play flute, bass, clarinet, and alto sax on the album. He's got a couple different groupings of musicians here. There's one track on here with just the bassist Chuck Israels, who didn't Chuck Israels play with Bill Evans, the pianist? So there's one track that's just a flute and bass duet. Version of God Bless the Child, which is solo Eric Dolphy on bass clarinet. And the rest of the albums, that's only 2 tracks there, but the rest of the album is Eric Dolphy, Bent Axon, who these are all European musicians, on piano, Eric Mosholm on bass, and John Elniff on drums. So piano, bass, and drums trio backing Eric Dolphy. Haven't listened to this one for a long time again. But this was repackaged. So this came out, in sometime around 60, probably early 62, I'm guessing, as 2 separate albums. And I know I have volume 2 somewhere. I went through this little period. This is nice cover. I went through this little period of really heavily getting into Eric Dolphy. After I really got into the ECM musicians, and I had a lot of ECM albums, particularly I kept on seeing Eric Dolphy's name being brought up when reading about Jan Garbarek. And I don't know specifically if Garbarek may have mentioned him in an old interview that I read, or whether it was just the critics mentioning Dolphy being an inspiration to Jan Garbarek. So here's the liners. Abnormally large print, and not, there's not. It looks like there's a lot written, but the print is pretty big. But still, this probably was one of my weekend purchases, one of my Friday night or Saturday purchases when I just had to get a twofer, like I mentioned in my last video, and go home, put the album on the turntable, sit there, stare at the cover, read the liner notes, kind of thing while you're listening to the music. So, and here's another, I haven't picked these up yet on CD, so 2 for 2 here. Though I'm sure because Dolphy is very well respected, and these albums are on, was it Milestone? Prestige, and Prestige very much keeps everything in print. So I'm sure that that these particular albums of Dolphy's are available on CD. I'm a little afraid that the Elvin Jones isn't, though. Oh, by the way, the Elvin Jones is called Earth Jones. I failed to mention the title of it. 3 for 3. Let's see what else I can pull out. Man, oh man. I guess I shouldn't have gone back to the same spot. Here's another Eric Dolphy. I didn't realize I was picking from the same spot. Maybe I wasn't. These I don't know if these are actually in any. They were in order when I moved and when I threw them back there. I don't know. Eric Dolphy's Out to Lunch. This is a classic album. This is a Blue Note album. Again, another early one. And this one is definitely in print. Do I? Again, geez, I don't think I have this on CD. I'd be surprised. This is one of those, when they point to Eric Dolphy's discography, always comes up. This was I guess this was an import, because it's the original album cover, and I'm fairly sure that Out to Lunch was part of a twofer as well. I could be wrong, but I thought it was part of a twofer. This is the original album cover, but this doesn't come from the OJC original Jazz Classics collection, where they reissued the albums with the original liner notes and covers and everything. And this looks like an import. It's got like an Obi kind of strip on there, but it doesn't specify that it's from Japan. So it's really hard to tell. But, this is one of his classic early albums, with those were the original liner notes that were in the back. And I certainly didn't buy this at the time it came out, which would have been the early 60s. Or even, let me see, if there's even a date on here. I'm not sure when this was recorded, but I want to say somewhere between 59 and 61, I'm guessing. And it's got the entire album, which is 5 tracks, are all Eric Dolphy originals. Quite a band. Tony Williams on drums, who must have been incredibly young. Richard Davis on upright bass. Bobby Hutcherson on vibes. Wow, what a band. Freddie Hubbard even on trumpet. And Eric Dolphy on alto sax, flute, and bass clarinet. Wow, what a band. Every single one of these guys are leaders. Eric Dolphy often had at least one, unusual but atypical instrument in his albums he made as a leader in the studio. One of his early albums, like in this one, Vibes, at this time was maybe not that standard in a group, in a jazz band. I know in one of his earlier albums, had a cello player in the group. So he always had this eye out for something apart from just typically the normal piano, bass, drums, and then horns backing. He usually like to have another color in there. Though, as goes to show you with the other album I showed it, that's pretty much straightforward piano, bass, and drums backing, but that was under a touring situation where I think the band was probably supplied to him and not a regular group that he toured with. So I mean, he did things with a standard piano, bass, drums trio backing him live, especially. But his studio albums tend to usually have one of those slightly different instruments in there, just to mix up the sound a little bit. Interesting guy. And so far, I picked out 3 albums that I don't have on CD, so I haven't heard them for years. I loved all of them, though. And of course, now I'm like, I have to put those on my wish list, which is, only about 3,000 items right now. Okay, well, I finally picked out an ECM album. I thought I had chosen this before. This is an interesting Keith Jarrett. This is I was going to call it a twofer, but it's not a twofer as in a repackaging of old albums. It's this was fairly unusual when this came out for the reason that it came out in 1981. This one I actually do have on CD though. In that it's 2 albums that are totally unrelated to each other. And I'm not sure of the reasoning why ECM kind of packaged them together, because they're 2 separate projects done at 2 different times, unrelated thematically in any way. But it's a nice mixture of sounds, because as I did, you play both albums back to back, you get completely different kind of instrumentation on the 2 albums. The first album, let me see if I can see what was recorded. It's a little hard to tell what was recorded when. Okay, the first album, called The Moth and the Flame, is a studio album, not untypical studio album of just solo piano, Steinway piano. I believe these were improvisations. Let's see if it says in here. It doesn't specifically say that they're improvisations, but I believe they are. It's about a 40-minute album. The Moth and the Flame in 5 parts of just solo piano, which there's a lot of solo piano Keith Jarrett albums. Recorded in November 1979. And for some reason they didn't release it right away. They held on to it, but that could be just because of the sheer volume of things that Keith Jarrett recorded. The second album in here, called Invocations, was recorded 11 months later in October 1980. And that is quite unusual. There's only maybe 1 or 2 other albums that are similar to this in Keith Jarrett's discography, because he plays one of those huge pipe organs. So it's pipe organ and soprano saxophone. Pretty avant-garde stuff, pretty out there stuff. I wouldn't suggest it as an introduction to Keith Jarrett's work, but it's one of those things that he did that's uniquely him, and it's kind of on the cusp of what he does. It's quite a bit more maybe avant-garde than a lot of Keith's stuff, certainly most of his stuff for ECM, which was a slightly more pastoral or jazz-like if he was working with a jazz quartet with a rhythm section. But again, completely solo album of just Keith playing one of those huge pipe organs and kind of experimenting with all the different stoppers and the bar string things that you can change the sound of the organ with, and then playing some soprano sax, some very echoey soprano sax along at times. Pretty avant-garde. Very interesting contrast to the piano, which is the piano album is not really terribly avant-garde. It's fairly thematic, and I hate to use the word pretty, but it's maybe more compositional, certainly not avant-garde. So, side by side, they make a kind of interesting combination of albums that really don't have anything to do with each other. And I think they may have been just put together because ECM had the Moth and the Flame in the can and hadn't released it after 11 months when Keith Jarrett went in to record the Invocations, and just decided to put them together. I think maybe because of the amazing amount of material that Keith was coming out with at the time, and maybe because some people that might be Keith Jarrett fans of his piano playing, might not take so well to the kind of avant-garde pipe organ of the Invocations album, and so they would have another album on here of probably what they want to hear, which is Keith's piano playing, which I do have. I'm pretty sure I have this. Yeah, pretty sure I have this on CD. And there's just a picture of him on one side, and then a listing of the tracks and the recording dates. I wish ECM would have gotten into that liner note thing, but they never did they? The heavy liner notes. I'd love to hear them talk about the sessions that were recorded. After all, the ECM artists in particular, like most creative music artists, are I'm sure influenced by a lot of things, and especially when they're artists that create a lot of their music on the spot with improvisation, as both of those albums are. I think it'd be interesting to hear about the circumstances surrounding the recordings, and maybe what was going through the artist's mind, and a lot of times the location has something to do with it as well. So there's a lot of things to consider, and that may be unique to that particular recording scenario that I would love to know about, but ECM was just never very good with including liner notes. And I mean, you could attempt to, I guess, interview Keith Jarrett, but would he even remember all these years later with all the sessions he's done? I think the only sessions he would remember are those that stood out as being particularly unusual or difficult or whatever. So I got an ECM. This would have been like the third video with no ECM recordings if I hadn't pulled that out. So for me, this is a short video. I'm going to cut it here just because, again, I don't know how well this is recording. I'm a little bit on the cold side, even though I have my candle burning. Believe it or not, that little candle isn't kicking up much heat. Who knows, if we get one of those 50-degree days. I thought I saw in the news today that there was one coming down the pike, but the last one we had, it was actually very cold. But hey, I might get out here once again. Who knows? I'll try if I can, and if the computer holds up, and if I can manage not to freeze my butt off, I will be out here again. So thanks again for watching my videos. I have almost no subscribers to what is going to be my main channel, which is Gary H's Hip Road. Right now I have 35 subscribers there. I have to get more. And so I'll be doing a slight alteration to the way I review albums, hoping that it'll interest more people. And I don't necessarily think that the people who regularly watch me will notice much of a difference. But for my next video, I decided to pick out, I wanted to do a top 10 albums by this group, but I couldn't narrow it down to 10, so I had to make it 11. So my next video, or a video coming very soon, will be my top 11 albums by none other than Kiss. So I hope you'll be looking forward to that, Gene Simmons and guys. Okay, so I'll be back soon, guys. Hope to see you all soon. Take care. Tune in next time for more
Tales from the Garage.